The British pilot was tall, broad-shouldered and pale, but that last part might just have been because he had a sprained ankle and had lost a lot of blood. He was heavy too, heavier than I expected. He leaned on me for support as I led him away from the hedge. I didn't know how much of a false blood trail he'd left, or how long we had until the searchers would come running back over that hill, so I picked up the pace. The airman grunted. Three-legged race never was my favourite event at the village fair. Do you always joke around when your life is in danger? I asked him as we limped into the barn. No better time, he said. He stopped. This your idea? Hide me in the barn. I didn't hide here in the first place because it's the most obvious place to look. I didn't tell him it was the first place I'd looked for him, but I did tell him it was the last. That's why it's the perfect place now, I said. What better place to hide than some place that's already been searched and cleared? A slow grin spread across the pilot's face. Very clever. Are you sure you're Irish? You seem like a nice enough fellow. I threw back at him. Are you sure you're English? He laughed and picked up a pitchfork. Together we dug as far back into the hay piles as we could, and I made a little nest for the pilot while he cut a piece of his shirt away to bandage up his arm. There was a lot of blood. Too much. I worried he might bleed to death before we could come back and get him. Stay here. My parents will pick you up tonight. And just who are your parents? What are you doing here in Berlin? My dad is the Irish ambassador to Germany, I told him. They've helped other Allied pilots get out of Germany. They'll help you too. But they don't even know you were shot down. I had to act fast. I'm glad you did, he said. And he shook my hand. This barn was quickly turning into the place where I made new friends. I didn't know a German word for that, so I made one up. Die Freundschaftsurverein Schulen. The befriending barn. Wait, I need you to do one more thing, he said. I took a camera with me from the plane, a big camera. I was taking reconnaissance photos, very important reconnaissance photos. I need you to find the camera, get the film. It's vital that the film make it out of Germany, even if I don't. I hid it in one of the haystacks in the field where I came down. Which haystack? I asked. The British pilot smiled apologetically. The brown one? Exposed. I searched the haystacks for half an hour before the search party came back over the hill. I was as empty-handed as they were. It was late in the day. Time to head back to Berlin. Reinforcements from the city had arrived. The search for the airmen would continue without us, and my search for the camera would have to wait until I came back with my parents tonight. Where were you? Fritz asked me when we met back up at the truck. I didn't see you on the search hills. I thought maybe he'd double back a second time to really throw us off the scent. I lied. So I searched the haystacks across the road. Fritz laughed. You're quite the gumshoe. I was surprised he used the word gumshoe. It was one of those English words there's no German translation for. If you want to use it, you have to say it in English. And using English words, or words from any other language besides German, was the kind of thing that drew the attention of the SRD and the Gestapo. And how did Fritz know it anyway? The only place I'd heard it was in American movies, and they didn't show those here anymore. I didn't have time to ask him about it. The SRD lined us up, and the SS agents spoke to us again. They frowned at us, angry, as if it was our fault the British pilot had gotten away. In my case, at least, they were right. A disappointing day, one of the SS said. The British spy will be captured. Every man, woman and child in this country is his enemy. He will find no help from anyone. Well, not every man, woman and child, I thought inwardly. I smiled. In the meantime, we have at least found what he came to do. A cold grin split the SS man's face as he held aloft a large black camera. I sagged. They must have found it when they were searching in the field, long before I ever went looking for it. The SS officer flipped open the back of the camera and yanked out the long plastic film strip inside, exposing it to the light and ruining it forever. A small problem. It was dark when my parents and I came back that night. The moon was down and the stars were out. Da drove the last mile or so without the headlights on. I don't like this, he said. Well, I don't like it much either, Ma said. But we can't just leave the lad there to be captured by the Nazis. No, Da said. I mean, I don't like Michael hiding English airmen in barns in broad daylight. He should have never done it. And what was I supposed to do? I said, leaning over the back of the front seat. Just let him get caught? Yes, Da said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't find the words. I looked to my ma in the seat beside him. She had to agree with me. She was the real spy in the family. He's right, Michael, Ma said. Sneaking into studies is one thing. Hiding Royal Air Force pilots is another entirely. But nothing, Da said. What if you'd been caught? Ma turned to look at me. Michael, it's terrible to say so, but sometimes you have to weigh the cost of one man's life against the value of an entire operation. Suddenly I was back in the street again during Crystal Night, hurrying past a man being beaten to death by the Gestapo, doing nothing. My face burned hot and my heart beat faster. It's taken me years to set up my informant network back in Berlin, Ma went on. If you'd been caught, your father would have been expelled and we would have lost everything. That's what this is about? I said. No, that is not what this is about, Da said, scowling at Ma. It's about Michael getting shot, or worse. Only in Nazi Germany was there something worse than being shot. The concentration camps. Michael, you've a terrific mind for details, and the information you've helped send back has been dead useful, Da said as he drove on. But you're 13 years old. You've no business putting your life on the line for anything. I thought Ma might say something in my defence. After all, she was the one who trained with the Irish intelligence since she was 16 years old. She was the one who had taught me how to come up with an excuse to leave a party, how to slip away unnoticed, how to lie. It was an argument she and Da had all the time. But if she thought different this time, she bit her tongue. I folded my arms across my chest and stared out the window. No business putting my life on the line for anything. That was exactly what was wrong with Nazi Germany. Some of the Germans must have disagreed with Hitler and the Nazis, but they were afraid that if they did something, said something, they might get shot. Or worse. So instead of anybody doing anything to help anybody else, they kept their eyes on their feet and pretended the sky wasn't falling down on their heads. How could none of them do anything? How could I not? Da had only allowed me to come along tonight because I knew where the pilot was hidden. He parked the car far down the lane from the farm and we snuck quietly up to the barn. The farmhands ought to be sound asleep, and any search for the airmen called off till morning, but we still had to be careful. The barn door creaked so loud, I thought for sure they could hear it all the way back in Berlin, but no lights came on in the farmhouse. There was another surprise too. The barn was full of sleeping cows. Da and Ma and I tiptoed between them, careful not to wake them and set them to mooing, which for sure would wake the farmhands. At last we came to the pile of hay where I'd buried the pilot. Hopefully not for good. We dug in the hay with our hands instead of the pitchfork, so as not to spear the airman. But the deeper and deeper we dug, we still couldn't find him. Ma shot me a silent question with her eyes. Are you sure this is where you left him? I nodded an emphatic yes, this was where I left him. But what if the SS had searched the outbuildings again, not trusting us to do the job? What if they'd already captured the British pilot? Was he sitting in some cell in Berlin, somewhere right this minute? SS agents interrogating him? Torturing him? A hand popped up out of the hay beside me, making me jump. He was still there, and he was still alive. My father took the airman's hand and pulled him out while my mother and I brushed the hay from him. He looked worse than before, but Ma would get him fixed up as soon as we got him back to the embassy. Did you find my camera? He whispered to me. I shook my head. The SS found it first. He sighed and nodded. We can at least get you out of here, Ma said. You'll have to stay with us a while in Berlin first, until you heal up. What's your name, son? Da asked. Lieutenant Simon Cohen, sir, he said, giving us a British salute. My mother and father froze. You're a Jew? Da asked. Afraid so, Simon said, flashing that apologetic smile again. Is that going to be a problem?